He didn't wait for her to hold the baby before he handed her the envelope. Lorraine Shepherd had been in labor for 19 hours. The epidural had worn off somewhere around hour 14, and by the time the nurses were counting down and telling her to push, she had gone somewhere else in her mind. Somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't hurt. She had thought about the house on Rideau Lake that her grandmother had left her, the birch trees in September, the way the dock creaked at 4 in the morning when the loons were still calling. She had not thought about her husband, but there he was, standing at the foot of the bed in his good coat, the charcoal cashmere one she had dry cleaned for him 3 weeks ago, holding a white envelope with the calm of a man who had prepared for this moment for a very long time. "There's no good time for this," Marcus said, "so I'm not going to pretend there is." The nurse who had been recording the birth weight stopped writing. She didn't leave, she just stopped. Lorraine looked at the envelope. She looked at the baby in the bassinet beside her, her daughter 6 pounds 4 ounces, a full head of dark hair, 12 minutes old. She looked back at Marcus. "What is that?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Separation papers." He set the envelope on the blanket near her feet. "My lawyer says it's cleaner if you receive them in person. I'm sorry it has to be now. I wanted to tell you before, but get out, Lorraine. Get out of this room." He left. He didn't look at his daughter on the way out. 3 years earlier, Lorraine Shepherd had been the kind of woman people described as quietly capable. She was a civil engineer by training, 41 years old, with an office at a mid-sized infrastructure firm in Ottawa. She ran half marathons in the spring. She made her own bread on Sundays. She had a way of solving problems so cleanly that people forgot there had been a problem at all. She had met Marcus Fairfax at a fundraiser for the Ottawa Humane Society. He had been standing near the silent auction table looking slightly lost, which she later understood was a performance. Marcus was never actually lost. He was an architect 10 years her senior, with a firm that specialized in commercial towers and the kind of confidence that filled a room before he entered it. He was funny. He was attentive. He called when he said he would call. They had been married within 18 months. What Lorraine had not told Marcus, not in any direct way, was that the property on Rideau Lake was more than a family cottage. Her grandmother, Elspeth Shepherd, had owned 1,100 acres of undeveloped land running along the eastern shoreline, land that had been in the family since 1921, land that had never been subdivided, land that 3 separate development firms had approached Elspeth about in the last decade of her life, and that Elspeth had declined to sell because, as she told Lorraine at 84, the moment you sell the land, you become the kind of person who needs the money. Elspeth had left everything to Lorraine, not to Lorraine and Marcus. To Lorraine by name, in a will drafted 6 months before the wedding and never updated. Lorraine had not hidden this from Marcus. She had simply not explained its full weight. He knew there was a cottage. He knew there was land. He had kayaked on the lake twice and called it charming. He had not asked about the deeds. She found out about Tamsin Brouillard in December, when her marriage was 2 years old, and she was 4 months pregnant. It wasn't dramatic. There was no lipstick on a collar, no intercepted text message. A colleague of Marcus's had mentioned, without realizing what she was saying, that Marcus had brought his girlfriend to the firm's holiday party. The colleague had assumed Lorraine knew. Lorraine had smiled and said, of course, and then she had gone to the bathroom and sat on the closed lid of the toilet for 11 minutes, doing nothing, until the feeling in her chest settled from wild to merely constant. She did not confront Marcus that night. She did not confront him the following week. Instead, she made an appointment with a lawyer she had found through a friend. A woman named Patricia Osi-Barima, who worked out of a low-key office on Elgin Street and had a reputation for being very, very thorough. "Tell me everything," Patricia said. "The land, the marriage, the finances. Don't leave anything out because you think it's boring." Lorraine told her everything. Patricia had been quiet for a long time after. Then she had said, "Your husband doesn't understand what he married." "No," Lorraine had agreed. "He doesn't." The separation papers sat on the bedside table in the hospital room for 2 days before Lorraine touched them. She was busy. Her daughter, she named her Nora Elspeth after her grandmother, was a good sleeper but a difficult feeder, and the lactation consultant came twice a day. And Lorraine's mother had flown in from Victoria. and was alternating between holding the baby and crying. And there were forms to fill out and a birth announcement to write, and approximately 47 text messages to respond to. She also, if she was honest, didn't need to read the papers yet. She already knew what was in them. What she hadn't told anyone about yet was the call she had received in October, 6 weeks before Nora was born, from a land developer named Raymond Cloutier. Raymond represented a consortium that wanted to build a resort and marina on the eastern shoreline of Rideau Lake. He had been trying to reach someone about the Shepherd parcel for 3 years. He had been trying to reach Marcus, assuming Marcus controlled the asset, and Marcus had apparently been stringing him along, telling Raymond that the family was still discussing options. Lorraine had introduced herself on the call as the sole registered owner of the Shepherd land. Raymond had been silent for a long moment. Then he had said, "Oh, I see. Well, the offer we've been discussing with your husband was $8.4 million. But if you're the decision-maker, we'd want to start the conversation fresh." She had told Raymond she needed 3 months. Raymond had said he could wait. She had not told Marcus about the call. Marcus came back to the hospital on the second day with a woman Lorraine didn't recognize. Tall, mid-30s, brown hair pulled back, wearing a coat that was too light for February in Ottawa. She stood in the hallway outside the room while Marcus came in alone. "I just want to make sure you're okay," he said. And to see, he stopped. Nora was asleep in Lorraine's arms. She had her father's jaw and her grandmother's hairline, and she smelled like something Lorraine couldn't describe and didn't want to try. "You can see her," Lorraine said. "She's your daughter." Marcus crossed the room and stood over them. Something moved across his face, something that might have been real if he had been a different person. He reached out and touched the baby's hand, one finger, briefly. "She's beautiful," he said. And then, as if he couldn't stop himself, "I hope you understand that this doesn't have to be adversarial." Lorraine looked at him. "I have a lawyer," she said. "Her name is Patricia O.C. Barama. All communications from now on go through her." He nodded slowly. "Of course, my lawyer will. What firm is she with? She'll send her contact information." He waited as if he expected something else. When nothing came, he said, "I know the timing was terrible. I want you to know that." "I do know that," Lorraine said. "I've known a lot of things for a while." He left. The woman in the hallway fell into step beside him. Lorraine watched them through the glass until they turned the corner. Then she looked down at Nora, who had not woken up, and said very quietly, "Okay." Her mother, Donna, was not quiet about any of it. "He handed you papers in the delivery room," she said, for what Lorraine counted as the 6th time, standing in Lorraine's kitchen 3 weeks after Nora came home, holding a cup of tea with both hands. "He handed you papers in the delivery room while you were still? Mom?" "I'm not going to let it go, Lorraine. I'm going to be talking about this when I'm 80. I know you are." "What did his mother say? Does his mother know?" "I don't care what his mother says." Donna set her tea down. "What does the lawyer say?" "She says he made a strategic error." Donna raised an eyebrow. "What kind of error?" Lorraine had thought carefully about how much to tell her mother. Donna was warm and she was loving, and she was reliably, predictably unable to keep a secret. "The kind that's going to matter," she said carefully. Donna looked at her for a long time. Then she picked up her tea again. "All right," she said. "I trust you." Marcus's lawyer was a man named Gerald Fortier, a partner at one of the larger firms on Bank Street, the kind of firm whose name appeared on construction hoardings and hockey arena naming rights deals. He was thorough, Gerald. Lorraine had to give him that. He had filed quickly, cited irreconcilable differences, proposed a division of the marital home and the joint savings account, and noted the Shepherd land holdings as an asset to be assessed for equalization. Patricia read his filings with the expression of someone finishing a mediocre novel. "He thinks the land is a marital asset," she said. "He thinks it goes into the pool." "Can he argue that?" "He can argue whatever he likes." Patricia turned the page. "He's going to argue that you benefited jointly from the land during the marriage, that it formed part of the marital home's economic context. He's going to say you used land income to support household expenses. We didn't. The land generated no income during the marriage. It was undeveloped." "I know. That's his problem." Patricia set the filing down. "Your grandmother left the land to you personally, before the marriage, in a will that was never changed, that explicitly excludes any future spouse, and that was registered with the province. There is no ambiguity here. The Shepherd parcel is excluded from marital property under Ontario Family Law Act unless you commingled it with marital assets, which you did not. Lorraine nodded slowly. Now, Patricia said, tell me about Raymond Cloutier. Lorraine told her. Patricia's expression didn't change much, but she did take out a new sheet of paper and start writing. 8.4 was the number Marcus was negotiating to, she said. What did Raymond say the fresh start number was? He said he wanted to begin the conversation again. He didn't give me a number. I'll reach out to Raymond's counsel this week. Patricia capped her pen. I want that conversation to happen before the equalization assessment is filed. I want the land's value on the record before Gerald Fortier puts his number on it. The appraisal came back in late March. 1,100 acres on the eastern shoreline of Rideau Lake, with existing road access, hydro easements already in place, and a development application pre-approved by the municipality for mixed residential and marina use. Assessed value, $14.2 million. The consortium's offer, once Lorraine and Raymond Cloutier sat across from each other, without Marcus, without Gerald Fortier, with only Patricia in the room beside her, came in at $11.8 million. Raymond said they could go to 12.2 if she was willing to retain a small parcel around the original cottage site. She was. She had always intended to keep the cottage. Elspeth had built it herself, or close enough, had hired the lumber and done the framing with two cousins one summer in 1958. The pine floors were original, the dock less so, but the view was unchanged. Lorraine signed the letter of intent on a Thursday afternoon in April. Nora was asleep in her car seat on the floor beside Lorraine's chair. Raymond looked at the baby on the way out and said, "She's going to have a good life." "Yes," Lorraine said. "She is." Gerald Fortier received Patricia's disclosure package on a Friday morning. Lorraine knew this because Patricia called her at 11:15 to say he had already called twice. "He didn't know about the appraisal," Patricia said. "No," Lorraine agreed. "He didn't know about the consortium." No, he definitely didn't know about the letter of intent. Marcus told him the land was worth $2 million. 3, maybe. He told him it was undeveloped scrubland with sentimental value. There was a pause on the line. "That's an interesting characterization of $14.2 million in lakefront development land," Patricia said. Marcus saw what he wanted to see, Lorraine said. He always did. There was another pause. "Gerald is requesting an urgent call. He says Marcus wants to discuss a revised offer. Tell Gerald I'm not available for calls. Tell him to put it in writing." The written offer came 4 days later. It was by any measure a significant shift. Marcus was now proposing to forego any claim to the Shepherd land entirely in exchange for a clean break. No spousal support on either side, a 50-50 split of the marital home's equity, and joint custody of Nora with a primary residence arrangement to be negotiated. Lorraine read it at her kitchen table at 6 in the morning. With a coffee she hadn't finished, and Nora asleep upstairs, she read it twice. Then she called Patricia. "The land concession is expected," Patricia said. "He has no case on the land, and Gerald knows it. The no spousal support clause is the play. He's hoping you'll trade the support claim for the clean break. What do you think? I think you have a newborn, a career, and $12.2 million coming in from the sale of land he never knew was worth anything. I think you don't need his support payments. I think the question is whether you want to take the clean break or whether you want to spend 2 more years in litigation." Lorraine looked out the window at the backyard. The maple tree she had planted the spring they bought the house. The garden beds that still had last year's dead stalks in them. "I want the clean break," she said, "but not on his timeline, not because he's scared." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "What do you want, specifically?" "I want primary residence for Nora. I want him to have access, real access, consistent access, because she deserves a father who shows up. But I want her here, with me, and I want it written clearly enough that there's no room to revisit it in 6 months when Tamsin gets bored and he decides he wants to be a full-time father. I can write that." "I know you can." Lorraine took a breath. "And I want the marital home. He won't agree to that without compensation. I'll buy out his equity. I have the funds." "Yes," Patricia said. "You do." Marcus met her in person once more before the final papers were signed. He had asked through Gerald for a meeting outside the legal process, just the two of them, no lawyers, no transcript. Patricia advised against it. Lorraine agreed to it anyway, because she was, at the end of things, still curious about him. They met at a cafe on Preston Street on a Tuesday in May. He was there before her. He stood when she came in, which struck her as an oddly formal thing to do. He looked tired, she noticed that. Not regretful necessarily, but tired in a way that suggested the last several months had not been easy. She wondered if he and Tamsin were still together. She didn't ask. "I want you to know I'm not contesting any of it," he said, when they had sat down and ordered coffee that neither of them would drink. "The land, the house, Nora's primary. I wanted to say something to you that isn't in a legal document." She waited. "I underestimated you," he said. "I don't mean that as an excuse. I mean it as the actual truth of the situation. I built a version of our marriage in my head where I understood what we had, what the assets were, what the future looked like. And I was wrong. Not just about the money. About who you were." Lorraine looked at him for a long time. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry about the hospital. I've been sorry about that since the minute I walked out." "I know that too." He turned his coffee cup on its saucer. How is she doing?" "How is Nora?" "She's good. She's sleeping better. She has your jawline." Something shifted in his face. I'd like to be better at this, the access visits. I want to actually show up." "Then show up," Lorraine said. It was not a challenge. It was genuinely the simplest thing she had to say. She doesn't need much right now. She needs consistency. She needs you to be where you say you'll be. "I can do that." "I hope so." They sat for another few minutes. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't the worst thing she'd ever sat through, either. When she stood to leave, he stood again. Are you going to be okay?" he asked. She considered the question, not dismissively, but genuinely. $12.2 million. The cottage and the birch, a daughter who slept through the night now mostly, a lawyer she trusted, a career she was returning to in September, a maple tree in the backyard that was, right now in May, absolutely covered in new leaves. "Yes," she said, "I'm going to be fine." And she walked out into the afternoon, and the sun was coming off the canal in that particular way it does in Ottawa in late spring, that particular low gold that makes even the concrete look warm. And she thought about her grandmother, about Elspeth standing at the edge of that dock at 4 a.m. listening to the loons. And she thought, not for the first time, and not for the last, that the women who came before her had known exactly what they were doing. She had a meeting with Patricia in an hour to review the final signature pages. Then she was going to pick up Nora from her mother's place and take her for a walk along the river. It was, all things considered, a very good day.